Good afternoon, members and members of the public and developers. Welcome to Plans Panel meeting. We have one new member today. Can we welcome Councillor Maloney? Yeah, he deserves it. Pleased to say she's our youngest councillor as well, only just out of university and coming in on the sharp end. But she asked really good questions on the site visit, so be careful, officers. She knows the plan. And can I welcome also Sharon Hamilton, who always steps in for us. Yeah, I like this. I like this.
I was here at last meeting as well.
And Councillor Walshaw, who's not been away too long, but he's come back as a substitute. We know him. You don't have to be gentle with Councillor Walshaw. He knows his way around this, and he. Yeah, why not? Why not? Why not? And we can't leave Barry Anderson out, because Barry Anderson is not sitting here as a Conservative member. He's sitting here as a Green member. He's standing in for David Blackburn.
Well, we've always said.
Well, that's worth a clap, isn't it? You're double. We haven't got. You got it out that nicely, but I can only say that the papers I've got in front of me, Dan isn't down for apologies, and you are down for standing in for Councillor Blackburn. So please remember you're a Green.
Councillor McKenna, he is actually standing in for Councillor Cohen. I think it is. Yes, it is on the script.
Oh well. Anyway, Barry, you're very welcome. You're very welcome, and I'm sure you'll take into consideration that you have to cover for Councillor Blackburn as well. Moving on then. As Councillor, I'm sorry, you're right. Sorry, I did. I'm so used to him sat around the table. You're right. We must not miss the former Lord Mayor, who's taken a year off to be in the less important job of Lord Mayor of Leeds. We all know this is the main job, City Plans Panel, don't we? This is the one. This is where it's at. And he's taken up his place again. So welcome. And again, Councillor Khan certainly knows his way around this panel. Okay, have I missed anybody? No. There's a lot of announcements there, wasn't there? Okay, if we can get back to, can I go around and formally introduce all members of the panel for the benefit of our audience? And I'll start with John, please.
Good afternoon, Jonathan Carr, Head of Development Management.
Good afternoon, Matthew Hills, Legal Officer.
Good afternoon, Debbie Oldham. I'm clerk to the panel.
Good afternoon, Stephen Valley, Design Officer.
Good afternoon, Councillor Colin Campbell. It is some considerable time since I was the youngest member of this panel. I thought you'd have given me a check, though, probably because I'm the oldest.
Give you a clap if you want.
Look, I often say this, Gladstone and I were like that.
Councillor Barry Anderson, Adland Wharfdale Ward.
Councillor Paul Wadsworth, I've been here quite a while, Gaysden Road and Ward.
Councillor Kaylee Brooks, Little London and Woodhouse Ward.
Councillor Annie Maloney at Beeston and Holbeck Ward.
Good afternoon, everyone. Councillor Asghar Khan for Beaumont House and Richmond Hill Ward, and it's lovely to be back here.
Councillor Neil Walsh, heading in High Park Ward, and I just want to reassure members of the public, no one's been to the pub before this panel started. I just want to make that absolutely clear.
Good afternoon, Councillor Sharon Hamilton, Moortown and Meanwood Ward.
Good afternoon, Councillor Peter Carlill, Carvely and Farsley Ward.
Hello, Gillian McLeod, Transport Development Services Manager.
Good afternoon, Tim Hart, City Centre Planning Team.
Afternoon, Daljit Singh, City Centre Team Leader.
Thank you for that. If we can get down to business now that we've had the lighthearted bit. As you all will know, City Plans panel deal with applications from the city centre, as well as the largest and most significant applications the council receive. The aim of the panel is to hear all relevant information from applicants, members of the public, and council officers to help members of the panel make their decision. With that, can I move on to agenda item 1? Debbie, please.
Thank you, Chair. Under agenda item 1, there are no appeals against the refusal inspection of documents. Under agenda item 2, there are no items which require the exclusion of the press or the public. Agenda item 3, there's no late items that I'm aware of. Agenda item 4, could I ask members to declare any interests? I'll take silence as there are none. Under agenda item 5, apologies for absence have been received from councillors Garthwaite, Gruen, Cohen and Blackburn, and councillors Walshaw, Hamilton and Anderson are attending the meeting as substitutes. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Debbie. Can we then move on to item number 6, please? Minutes of the meeting held on the 19th of May. If I go to page by page, please stop me if you want to make any corrections or alterations. Page 7, page 8, page 9, page 10, page 11, page 12, page 13, page 14, page 15, page 16, and finally page 17. Is there anybody who would like to move them as a correct record? Thank you. Is there any matters arising? If not, then can we move on to agenda item 7, please? And that's sorry. Oh, yeah. Well, nobody said anything. Can we accept the minutes? And we better show our hands for Colin. Okay, thank you. Moving on then to agenda item 7, which starts on page 19. Over to you, Tim, please.
Thanks very much, Chair. Good afternoon, members. This application for the demolition of an existing building and the erection of a 10-storey building comprising retail floor space at ground floor, commercial floor space at basement level, purpose-built student accommodation on the floors 1 to 9 with communal facilities in the building, an outdoor amenity space, comes due following a plans panel consultative meeting on the 21st of December of last year, when many members saw and supported the developing proposals. The planning application comes due today following a site visit this morning. I'm not sure if can I change the slides? Yeah. Right, thanks. Several of the members were on site visit this morning, where we went down to see the existing premises, the House of Fraser. The site's outlined in red on this diagram on the eastern side of Briggate, to the east of the Trinity Shopping Centre on the west side of Briggate. And there's, as you can see, it's a dense urban block with a variety of commercial, primarily retail uses in the area, as well as some residential uses which sit above some of the shops, including on the east side of Central Road, which is the road on the eastern side of the building. I suppose as a result of its historical context, there's a number of listed buildings in the area, including the attached building to the north of the site, which is 133 to 137 Briggate. At the south east corner of Briggate, the Yorkshire Building Society building, it's grade 2 listed building, and the buildings on the eastern side of Central Road in Vassaley House are also listed buildings. Elsewhere in the city centre, of course, numerous other listed buildings. The site actually sits outside the conservation area, but the city centre conservation area runs down north-south down Central Road. Clearly, officers and panel need to take into account the heritage context when coming to a decision on the application. Jumping back in time just over 100 years, this takes you to Edwardian Brigate prior to 1920. The site is located, we're looking northwards up Brigate from the junction Boar Lane and Duncan Street. Where the clock is, the Potts clock on the right hand side, that is effectively the beginning of the site, and the site extends down the street towards us. Why I'm highlighting this image is because the building which sits on the right hand side of the site, half of that building is retained, and half of that building is the listed building I just referred to at 133 to 137 Brigate. So back in 1920, the building was twice the width that it was now. I've drawn a red line down the middle of that diagram. So the retained existing listed building, which is off-site building, is that area extending from Grand to Cent, and then the building was knocked down in around about 1920 to allow the construction of the first Woolworths store on the site. That building, which Fred, I don't have a picture of today, but that building was demolished itself in the late 1950s and replaced with a building in 1959 for Woolworths. And that building still stands on the site today, albeit Woolworths vacated in, I think it was the late 1980s, to be replaced by Schofields and subsequently the House of Fraser, who I understand are intending moving out in the near future. So an image of the site as it stands today in Brigate, and just a few photographs as we move around direct view towards the property. It's starting to become a little tired. I think one of the things to point out on this diagram is the way in which the building, when constructed, didn't actually take into account the fact that it was being constructed neighbouring a listed building and actually wraps over and overlaps onto part of the frontage of that building. And part of the proposals here will help to recover the detail and the elevational treatment on the edge of that building. Looking southwards down Brigate, and this is a view across Duncan Street, looking up Central Road, and the site sits behind the maple tree in that location there. Apologies, this is taken a few months ago, but it's a view from outside the Corn Exchange. The public realm works have subsequently been completed recently, and we're looking again up across Newmarket Street, up Central Road, and there's a tree and another tree behind it before you get to the House of Fraser store. If you were to continue in the westerly direction, you go through Central Arcade. A view along Central Road, and looking down Central Road again from Keirgate, albeit there is an access into the House of Fraser store. I think it's come place that it's not been heavily used over recent years, and activity along the street has been quite minimal. This graphic is just an illustration of existing public realm along the street, with areas of brick paving effectively, which was part of the generation of public realm treatments from the 1980s, and that still persists today. As part of the development proposals, as a result of the additional pedestrian movements that would result from the development, we're discussing with the developer proposals to improve the surfacing within the street, and say these are ongoing discussions, which this is just representing one point in time in the discussions. The diagram does show cars on the street. The scheme is a no car scheme, but the existing disabled parking would be retained on Central Road. So to the scheme itself, This is the basement of the proposed building. As I mentioned at the outset, the building as a whole would be demolished. That's taking it all the way down to basement, and the basement would be reconstructed on the same footprint as the existing. The primary larger area of the basement would be used for commercial use, with an access directly off Central Road, with steps and a lift down from that point. The space could be used for retail or a variety of other commercial uses. The eastern part of the diagram shows an area which would be devoted to the student use, and that will include some student amenity areas, as well as the bin stores for the students and some of the cycle provision. Moving up through the site, we're just onto the ground floor now. We've Brigitte on the left-hand side of the diagram. The intent is that there'd be two large retail units with frontages as pretty much existing onto Brigitte. Towards the rear of the property, but as a new active entrance into the student accommodation at this point, again with additional amenity space within this part of the frontage. This is a CGI of what some of the area inside the amenity space could look like, looking out onto Central Road with Vasily House across the other side of the street. And this is a diagram which effectively is a cutaway through the proposed building, which gives you an idea, an indication of the relationship between that interior space and activity within it, and movement and activity along Central Road, to show the clear interconnection between the two spaces. Moving up through the building, we get to the first level of student accommodation at level 1, and there's a proposed mix of studios and cluster flats within the development. This alignment of the building is effectively an H shape, is the main frame for the building, sitting above the ground floor. You might notice areas outside of that, which to the north and south of it, which would be used as external amenity space. This is a view looking down on the site as a whole, looking at some of those spaces, and we're going to move up the levels as we work through the building. But the areas I was just talking about at level 1, an external amenity space here, and to the south side of the spine of the building on the southern side. And just some precedent images as to how that might actually develop as the details come forward. Moving up to, excuse me, to the next level gets us to a typical floor plan for levels 2 to 5 of the building. Where, as I mentioned, there's a mix of clusters and studios. All the studios and clusters meet and exceed the standards identified in the draft SPD. This diagram just gives an indication of typical layout in the smallest of the units. Excuse me. So on the left-hand side, an image of the smallest of the cluster flats, and on the right-hand side, an image showing a typical layout in one of the studios. I think we've moved up to level 6. You see on the left-hand side of the diagram, the frontage of the building has been set back. Now, that distance, one of the members asked me on site this morning, I think it's 1.8 metres on checking. And on the southern side of the eastern wing, the building's moved in. I've forgotten the number, but it's about 2.5 metres. If anybody wants, I can check for you in a second. Moving up to the next level again, the building sits back even further from the frontage. You see on the eastern side as well, the building stepped in from that front facade. I think we're on to level 8 now, and it's a rooftop external amenity space on top of the eastern wing, and format of studios along off the corridor of the spine of the building. And reference to the external amenity space, again, some precedent images as to how that could be developed out. The top level of student accommodation is on level 9. On the west end of that, you'll note this area, as with some other areas of terracing which can't be used, they would be laid out as green roofs. And an example of a green roof. And just an overview of the roofscape of the building, sitting in relation to the building to the north, which would be retained. I'll refer to that later as an update to the report, but comments have been received from the owners of that property in relation to the juxtaposition of the two buildings. And just to point out before we get to that point, the existing building line is on that line there, whereas the primary new building line for the main mass of the building sits back here. So an existing distance of 6.6 metres will become a distance of just over 17 metres at that point. Got some sections here, just giving a further indication of how the building is set out. The left side of the diagram on the west side is to Briggate, with that initial step back, and further step back, and a further step back to the top level, and equally on the central road on the eastern side, step back, and step back as the mass breaks down with increasing height. This is a rotated view through the spine of the building into the courtyard, which would be created. Apologies if the quality of this image hasn't come through very clearly, but again, it's just giving a further indication of how elements of the setback work in relation to the materiality proposed in the scheme. At the lowest level, this is facing Briggate. You see tall shop window, which would equate to the level and the height of shop windows on the frontage along Briggate. As you step up through the building, the arched head windows at first floor and top of level 4 reference the buildings both at 133, 137 Briggate and also 132 Briggate. Got paired windows between extruded piers, which are heavily articulated, creating deep recesses and lots of shadow. The paired windows sit within a frame of moulded masonry with balustrading across the front. As you move towards the top of the building, the materiality changes, and above level 5, where there'd be a chamfered cornice, materiality, the building itself recesses and materiality changes from stone to standing seam zinc. This is a cutout of the section onto Central Road. Again, I've mentioned a few times about the setback. There's a strong grid proposed along Central Road, just with single windows between each pier, which are extruded from the ground level detailing. Again, heavily moulded with balustrading. Where balustrades are required on the main frontages to the main streets, there would be glazed balustrades so as to limit visual impact. And the top level of the building above the standing seam zinc would be some curtain walling. Some precedent images of those materials. The agents and architects have kindly handed me some samples of those materials today, just before plans panel. If I may, if it's appropriate, I could pass those around, or whether or not members want to come and have a look at them here. Can I pass them around, Chair? So what we've got today is an example of cast stone, which is the Techcrete product, which would be used on the main frontages for Briggate and Central Road, with anodized aluminium, which is the primary base material on the Central Road elevation and the framing for windows, as well as a sample of some standing seam zinc. Now, the profile of the material would be as this larger piece, albeit the proposed colour is this lighter colour element. Thanks very much. And if people have forgotten what I was just referring to, these boards help to explain where those different materials would be used, and also help to pick out some of the detail that the images on the screen aren't able to do. So I'll just allow a minute for that to. Clearly, as we move forward through the process, we'll need to see some larger sample panels built up, and there is a requirement as one of the conditions that a mock panel is built up, so that we can have a good look at how all the different materials work together, how the joints and junctions are articulated. Say that be a condition of the planning permission. So what I've got here in terms of the final images to show you a selection of views up and down and around the site, showing existing situation and proposed development. Members who visited the site this morning will be familiar with a variety of these shots. So we just south of Commercial Street, looking southbound, and the new building takes clear reference from the scale of the building to its north. You can, in this view, just see a very slim sliver of the top of the building, but it's certainly not of any prominence. Just south of the junction with Boar Lane, looking northwards up Briggate. Here you see perhaps the upper elements of the building in the most extreme, put it that way, but the main mass of the building up to level 5 is the dominant element, and those upper elements, which would use a different materiality, are set back and don't have an adverse impact on the street scene. Particularly in this view, you see the Yorkshire Building Society on the junction of Duncan Street, Boar Lane, and Briggate, and that building, Grade 2 listed building, remains as a dominant property looking this northerly direction. Looking from Kirgate down Central Road, and the proposal with the new sweeping elevation, a strong grid, but the sweep of the curve accelerating the nature and the geometry of those vertical piers and the string lines with heavy detailing and deep recesses. It's looking north along Central Road, and the site sitting up behind and to the left of the tree. And the view from outside the Corn Exchange, looking across Newmarket Street. And you see the top of the building. Again, I think it's fair to say there will be areas where the tops of the building are visible, but given the position, given the scale, given the materiality, we don't think that those are harmful. A couple of images just of the building closer up. And down Central Road. And one of the developers team kindly provided a couple of sketches, which I think are of interest as well. These are on Central Road. I've got a couple of updates to the report to report to you further to the plans panel report deadline. We received a letter of support from the Illuminate Education Group and Leeds City College. They say the scheme would benefit the city centre by replacing the current use, which is no longer fit for purpose and has been devoid of investment for many years. It would replace an architecturally poor building with a good one. It would repurpose the store with a use which will bring vitality and vibrancy to the area. And it would integrate student living, which would be to the benefit of students, local businesses and the community. We've also had contact from the agents working on behalf of the freeholders of the property to the north, the listed building are referred to at 133 to 137 Brigitte, and their comments are as follows. They refer to the fact that there is planning permission for alterations of their building and change of use that could include residential apartments in the upper floors of that property. Whilst the freeholder welcomes the development that will generate activity and footfall, and they don't have any comment regarding the design of the building, but would like to see more detail about the relationship between the two, in particular, the juxtaposition with the listed building. And in that respect, given it's a listed building, where the junctions do operate, we'll be requiring listed building application, for instance, on that frontage element, which I referred to earlier. The agent requested that a sunlight and daylight report be prepared specifically in relation to the impact on that property if it were to be converted to residential use. That has been prepared and submitted. We've had a good look at that, and I have a copy of it here. And the conclusion of the report is that the scheme performs well from a daylight and sunlight perspective, and will not cause unacceptable harm to the residential accommodation within 133 to 137 Brigitte. I think officers would agree with that position. I think it's fair to say that although the new building will be taller than the existing, the offset would be very much greater than the existing arrangement. So if the neighbouring property was converted to residential accommodation, there would be a 6.6 metre gap between the two buildings. That would be increased to over 17 metres and a new courtyard created, which would actually, in my view, officers' view, actually enhance the situation. The freeholder further said that the amenities of neighbours need to be protected and servicing proposals need to accommodate the occupiers and the rights of access to their building. So the neighbouring building does utilise a shared service yard, and the servicing management plan, which is would be a condition of the planning permission, would deal with that matter. Coming to the end now. Finally, due to the scale and the proposed use of the building, the Health and Safety Executive are a statutory consultee on the application. Since the report was completed, the HSE has identified some outstanding technical concerns relating to the proposed means of escape and fire service access. Whilst the finer detail will be agreed at building regulation stage, officers consider that the technical matters referred to by the HSE should be addressed prior to the grant of planning permission. Accordingly, it's still recommended that Plans Panel defer and delegate approval of the application, subject to the matters highlighted by the HSE being resolved. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Tim. There are no objectors to this application. I have seen that the applicants have come forward, sat in the appropriate position. So when I invite members to speak, they may well ask questions of the developers, and I'm sure they'll be willing to answer them. Open to questions from members. Councillor Hamilton, please, first.
Mine is regarding the tree at the back. At this moment in time, it's paved over with tar and bricks, etc. Obviously, you're going to preserve the tree. I'd like to suggest that it's not paved or bricked and left, oh, it's gone. Look similar to what's been sketched on the picture number 51. And can we just look at number 49, please, Tim? Right there. Can I say, can we ensure that the tree isn't damaged so that we don't end up in a couple of years that it looks like that? And that looks dead to me. I mean, I suppose it's supposed to be when all the leaves has been shed, but can we ensure that there's no damage to it? Because the tree is growing and the roots are spreading. So can we ensure that it's preserved? And also looking at it down there, at this moment in time, the branches are touching House of Fraser. We don't want in a couple of years, once it's been, once the building is up, that the residents are complaining they can't see out, it's windy, and the branches are knocking on their window. So, you know, we're going to end up start trimming the tree. So that's what I would like. I'd like to admit you to ensure, Jack, during, if it's go through, during the demolition and the reconstruction, that the tree is preserved. Also, just on that, the cafe at the back at this moment in time uses, beside the tree, they have a couple of tables, etc. Is that your land? And also, will you use that for the residents that live there, that they can sit out rather than it be the cafe? I don't know what arrangement you have with the cafe at the moment, but for me, they would have to go on for the residents to use. So if you can just let me know what you're going to do to ensure that the tree is preserved and not end up like number 49.
Sharon, I think that's questions to the applicants. So please, if you could address that and introduce yourself for the benefit of members when you speak.
Thank you. My name is Dave Rollinson. I'm the agent for the application, and my colleagues are either from the developer or technical consultees to answer any questions. Thank you for your points. Yes, we are definitely going to retain the tree. We've had a tree survey done of it. You quite rightly can see that the root ball is bulging up because it's constrained, and what we're seeking to do, both as part of the construction and the long-term management, and there is a condition requiring this, but we've already submitted the details of it, to give it some breathing space, to give it some room, to allow that to happen. We will have seating areas around the tree. The tree won't sit in isolation with the paving right up to it. It will have that breathing space and sitting areas. We don't own that land, so what we're looking to do is work with you as the council through a Section 278 agreement to deal with the highways, and that's the proposal as part of the public realm. So what we do need to do, as you say, it currently sits next, it's so tight up to the building, we do need to do some small scale pruning, and we've identified the details of that, but that's simply to allow the construction, then it can grow back. And that's gone through your officer consultees. With regard to the use of the tables and the cafe, we have engaged with the cafe owners and with the businesses along there, and you may see in the officer report that we've set up a forum for those people to continue the engagement with us through the construction and long term. So we're very much supportive of all that animation and activity along Central Road as they are. You will have seen 7 letters of support around that. So absolutely, we can take on board the points that you've raised, and we've submitted sufficient evidence at this stage, I think, to give the confidence. The last thing to say probably is the details of that are subject to a condition and further ongoing, and Mr. Hart identified that. So we can take on board the precise details and work that to your officer's satisfaction to comply with that condition.
Is that okay, Sharon? Thank you, David. Moving on then, Kaylee, Councillor Brooks, please.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, let me just get my notes up. My apologies. So I'm a bit concerned about the massing and sort of visual impact on the heritage scenes. I find the top layer to be quite visually jarring. I accept that the rest of it is set back, but the top layer seems a bit of a step too far to me. Fully agree with Councillor Hamilton's comments about the damage to the tree. I hope that there's a proper plan in place to properly protect that. And then, okay, hang on. Right, parking. I'm a bit confused as to why in the slides there's reference to parking when it's a car-free development. Because I mean, obviously you're going to have a drop off and pick up sort of plan, but does that mean that there's a agreement to have access to the building for drop off and pick up when it's a time of year for that to happen, or is it that students will be expected to get there on foot by public transport? Thank you.
I think they're all questions for you, David. Please answer.
Thank you, and thank you for the questions. I'll deal with them in reverse if that's okay. The reason you've seen some of the sketches with parking is it's the existing blue badge parking which is being retained. So we are car free. You're absolutely right. We have no car parking spaces, but I think in December you asked us to answer that question where we're retaining all the blue badge parking in its entirety, and we are. So the second point was the drop off and pick up. As you rightly say, there's conditions requiring us to have a management plan, and we've already worked through that through our travel plan. There are a series of car parks, but I think our first proposition is that the students should use public transport because we are so accessible to the railway, and part of the travel plan seeks to encourage them and give them the information as to how to do that. The second point then is that the operator will have an agreement or is seeking to have an agreement with the adjacent car parks. And I say adjacent, we've got a list of them all, and they are all in close proximity. And then the operator will ensure a staggered drop off and pick up, and it's more drop off than pick up to ensure that it's not overloaded to work through. And then during construction and operation, Central Road will be maintained. So we're not seeking to close that off. We will have working areas, but it can be maintained through. So taxis can continue to utilise that through that process. And the level of servicing that we identify is similar to the current level of servicing on House of Fraser. And again, all that can be accommodated on the restrictions, the traffic regulation order restrictions that are already in place. We can accommodate those. So from that point of view, and I'll come back to the next point, but from that point of view, I hope that clarifies the points that you raised. Tree, I've covered. Yeah, absolutely. No problem. With regard to the massing and visual, I'll deal with it, and then I'll ask our architect to just come in with some more of the detail. I think what we've done as a process is to engage specialist heritage consultants and townscape consultants, and we've started by looking at that visual envelope and how it sits within the policies and how it sits adjacent to the conservation area and the listed buildings, and we've done a lot of modelling around that. And I think if I introduce you now to Ed Norman, who's the architect, he will probably explain that in a bit more detail and then explain the materiality as to how you've dealt with the upper floors.
Thank you, and thank you for the introduction. I am Edward Norman, the architect working for the client. So, I mean, it's an interesting perspective, and I think that it's perfectly valid for someone to have an opinion as to whether or not they agree or support or don't the transfer of materiality from the sort of hip level of the building to the upper floors. What we've tried to do here is work a kind of a height, weight and distance hierarchy. So we looked at a number of views around the site, and what we wanted to ensure was that the heaviest element of the building, the most detailed, crafted and emblematic, if you like, element of the building, related to the existing heights, particularly on Briggate, with the listed building and just to the north of our site. The massing, as it then steps up behind, is set back, and in overall mass and form is different. It's not purely symmetrical with the building below. And I actually felt that to render that in the same material or with the same weight would actually make the building look rather strange and disjointed. And we actually felt that a contemporary approach to the materiality beyond the hip height was a more successful way to go. And through discussions with officers and others, it was actually agreed that if you look at the sort of eye line of buildings, whether it's from the Corn Exchange or Briggate or otherwise, you have this sort of visual line of the heavier weight buildings, whether they be in stone and brick. And then what we wanted to do with the setback portions was start to use more contemporary and indeed lighter weight and lighter coloured materials. So we go from that stone, then to the zinc, and then to the glass. So that was the kind of architectural philosophy around those changes in materials. Now, it'd be disingenuous of me to say that different people will have different opinions on whether that's a successful approach to architecture and whether it's done well here or done well or not so well somewhere else. But that was the philosophy that we discussed, reviewed, and worked on with officers and others in order to resolve our final solution in terms of the architectural appearance.
And if I can just say, obviously the committee report identifies it, but we've engaged both with your design team and with English Heritage England these days, to work all that through and to work that massing through. It's the same massing, the same scale that we presented to you in December, we, if you like, we got the feedback from you. So we've not changed, we've not increased. And what Ed and the team have done is evolve, because some comments were raised about the materiality of it. We've evolved that further, which I think Mr. Hart has identified in the committee report.
You, Ed?
Is it okay if I come back, Chair?
Do please. And can I say that Stephen, our design officer, is here? You might want to hear from him as well.
It's just a quick question, Chair. It's
okay.
Did you engage with Leeds Civic Trust at all?
We did, yes, we did. We engaged guys from Social, who are our community and engagement consultants, undertook a large-scale engagement. We did a presentation to the Civic Trust Committee, and again, you've seen the summary of their comments within the committee report. But yes, we had it wasn't a face-to-face; it was a Zoom at the time. But yes, we did have a direct discussion with them.
Okay, I'll bring Stephen in for a word as well, Kaylee, if you don't mind.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, members. The situation is, I would agree with the applicants. He's worked hard with us, and we've been through, I have to tell you on your behalf, Tim and I have been through countless iterations to try and get this right. If you do the upper floors in anything other than a light zinc or a glass, they're just going to look abysmally heavy as well. They'll stand out, you know, the view as you're walking up the streets and what, the upper floors stepping back means they're not towering over you on the street. And the long distance view from Corn Exchange, we worked hard with that. Yes, we can't deny there's more massing. But the existing building is low now for its context. And you end, you know, it's a matter of, we're not, the applicants haven't tried to pretend that it can all disappear. They've just worked hard to try and give it a lightweight, simple look, and then let the lower floors do the work of the architecture. And I think they've done a pretty good job, really. Does that help? I won't bore you with all the architectural words and details because I'll get myself lost.
That certainly helps, Stephen. You've given us another insight into how it's dealt with. So that's good. Thank you. Kaylee, is that okay? Can we move on?
That's fine, Chair. But I mean, my comments were more around the massing, not about the materiality. So I mean, if you look at slide 38, you can see that it looks big. And I'm not talking in terms of what's already there. I'm talking in terms of its location. You know, like thanks.
Okay, that's fine, Kaylee. We'll move on, and we will be moving to comments. So there might be something further on that at that stage. Can I bring in Councillor Campbell now, please, Colin?
Thank you, Chair. We did have a long discussion about this in December, if my memory is correct. And if you will recall, I was fairly vocal about Central Road because currently it's a bit of a dead area. It's a bit of a not very pleasant area to use because effectively it was the back of the store. And treated as the back of the store. So I was hoping, I'm relaxed about the frontage onto Central Road, but I was hoping that following on from Sharon's comment in relation to the tree, that we'll be talking about a bit more extensive improvements to to Central Road, particularly to make it into a much more, I was going to say, pedestrian-friendly area. I know you've made some proposals, but I think my view is perhaps they ought to be a bit more extensive and cover the entirety, if nothing else, for your frontage. In fact, the bit we can see at the moment between where the photograph's taken and the tree, I think that will, if you did that, that will provide a much better pedestrian domestic environment because there will be a lot of students in here and on a warm day like today it's a fair distance for them to walk to sit anywhere in a green space, and therefore they're going to spill out onto the surrounding road network. And I think you could do and I think I would ask you to do a lot more in relation to certainly this section of Central Road. Would that be possible?
Thank you, Councillor Campbell. If we stick with that drawing there, that actually doesn't depict our public realm improvements. So the reason for that is that this is an ongoing discussion because, as I said before, it's a section 278 element. It's the local authority land. As part of your highways consultee response, we're required to provide £606 per flat, which is £223,000 towards these sorts of activities. And what we've done is work with your colleagues in highways to look at those sorts of issues. So if we start from the point of view that you asked us in December to get more activity along that frontage, and we have now got our student amenity along that frontage, we've got the student reception area along that frontage, and we've got the main access for the basement leisure and retail activity. So we've animated the street, and then it comes down to the public realm elements. In looking at that overall figure, and that's, if you like, the SIL compliant figure, that's the figure that we've been working within, we do actually now extend improvements, not just along the whole of our frontage, but right up to the Kirgit link along the footpath area, because your highways colleague said to us, and I don't know whether, Tim, you can put perhaps the other drawing back up, there is an area of dark coloured block which feels like it's for highways, but it's not. There's bollards that stops it, and your highways colleagues rightly said to us that feels like an anomaly. So what we've agreed to do is to extend, if you like, the red line area of the public realm right the way along or north along Central Road beyond our frontage and to link with Kirgate, we've clearly retaining the tree and everything we've said. We're giving that tree breathing space and seating areas there. So that spill out that you asked for can be both from students and from the cafe into those areas. And then that anomaly, you can see it on there. I don't know, Tim, whether you can highlight the area, but you can see the anomaly between the two red elements that we will resolve. So what we're currently proposing to do is to bring the granite sets within the main spill out area, and then look at a variance between the granite sets and the red along that pedestrian area. But I have to say your comments are interesting and welcome, because it is an emerging scheme and we are working through. We have to set this in the context both of, you know, overall sort of build costs and inflation. We have to deal with what's required. And I think as a planner, I also have to just say to the client, look, there is a SIL requirement figure here and we're trying to deal with it. But your comments are welcome. We can continue that discussion with Tim and Stephen, and we can work through along there. But we will definitely introduce benches, and we will give the breathing space for the tree, and there will be that breakout space, and we will do some form of improved surface treatment right the way up to Kirgate. Does that help?
Does that help, Colin? Thank you, David.
Well, I suppose, yes, that does help. I suppose if I ask Gillian a question, if is it a SIL requirement for the 600 and odd pounds? Right. What's the requirement? What would be the requirement?
Thank you, Chair. I think I think there's a bit of confusion. I mean, SIL is nothing to do with the highway works. It's totally separate. There's been some custom and practice with student accommodation in other areas of the city centre where I think as a contribution to public realm, that figure has been used. Saying that, there have also been on these other schemes requirements for off-site highway works that are over and above that contribution level. So I think there has been discussion about that contribution level, but what that contribution level wouldn't do is fund the entirety of the scheme on Central Road. So I think the ideal and what we would like to achieve would be the entirety of that blue line area upgraded as part of this development. But what the developer said to us is that no, they can do this area that's white, but including that extended bit there at the end on the footway side. So that's where we're at. We would like the blue area. We're being offered a different area, but they're saying it is a cost and viability issue. I think the bigger concern is that you'll have a road that's a bit of a mishmash if this is paved in a different area to the blue, to the red blocks on the other side and the grey sets on the road. And then with the potential, the granite area that would reflect the granite stone that we've got on Kirgate. So we are at risk of getting a bit of a mishmash, albeit, we could potentially do something, this little area here could be significantly enhanced. I think where I'm at the moment is that we can deliver these via Section 278, but we haven't gone through that process yet to say that these are the off-site highway works. We've had a safety audit on them. We've accepted them. That we haven't gone through that process. So I think it's been a little bit perhaps not quite resolved at this stage.
We wouldn't. We wouldn't. You're not asking for any other off-site highways works. So it would simply just be this, because I know some of the other ones we've asked for some quite extensive off-site works, haven't we?
We have, yes. I think
we're not asking for car parking or even affordable units in this, are we?
I think I'll let Tim answer some of that, but no, we're not. I think the only other the other condition we have on it is a condition relating to doing a survey of the condition of the highway around the site, which would be on Briggate, Kirgate and Central Road. Because I think when you're developing in such a constrained city centre area and, with the demolition and then the construction, we would seek to ensure at the very least that we got the paving in a decent condition when they left the site. So there could be some requirement to repave if there was damage to the paving that was taken up and relaid. So that would be the only other implication.
Not really. The council is quite right that there's no requirement in relation to affordable housing provision given its student development. There's no other requirements in relation to highway works. It's self-supporting site in an accessible location. So it's primarily about getting the public realm right for the type of use that we're talking about and the additional pedestrian movements along that street. I think we all agree it's very tired at the moment and would be enhanced by the works that you talked about.
I have to say, David, and thank you for your reply, and you have moved, there's no question of it, but most members on site agreed with Councillor Campbell that, you know, it would make such a difference if this was paved in one generic material. It does very much look like back of house rather than front of house. And I think students expect a lot more than when someone was at a university and lived in bed sits. So it's something that I think should be seriously considered. And I think the question that was put by Councillor Campbell, that there's no requirement for affordable housing, so it does give you a bit of leeway. And clearly during the construction period, there's going to be a large building demolished. There may well be damage to that surface. I'd be surprised if there wasn't, quite frankly, as I'm sure you would be, you've nodded. So perhaps something to consider really seriously.
Thank you, and thank you for the comments. The reason I mentioned SIL is the SIL compliance, not the SIL money. But exactly, that's why we're here. Clearly, we would hope and we would like a positive resolution today, but that is, the details of that are, if you like, not before you. That is an ongoing condition discharge, and I've heard you clear. I'm sure Tim has heard you clear as to how we work through.
And can I just add that I'm Paul Cook from the developer. I think some of that detail will come through the liaison group that has been now set up that David mentioned earlier on, to allow our neighbours to have their say as well.
Okay, can I bring in Councillor Khan, please, now? Asgar?
Thank you, Chair. My question's already been covered by Colin and yourself, actually, and I will echo each word what they have said too. You know, I would love to see the improvement on the Central Road as well. That will help massively, and it will uplift the area also as well. So I want to support my those comments.
Thank you, Asgar. I see no more hands. Can we move on to comments? Comments we'll move on to. I'll start with Peter because you haven't spoken yet.
Thanks. I mean, in terms of the building as a whole, both on Briggate and from Central Road, I think it does look much improved to what was there. And the fact that there is some activity on Central Road is a bonus to what's there at the moment, and really will help the businesses opposite, the independent businesses that I think we raised, that we were very very keen was supported through this. I was going to add to the comments Colin made, so actually probably better if you come in before me in a way, but I think I'm a bit concerned around how people will feel accessing on bikes at the back of there as well, because that's where they'll be coming in. The black sets do make it look like it's highway space, and therefore make the cars feel that it is their space, and maybe anyone coming in to do any maintenance or deliveries, etc., when actually we see it very much as a pedestrian shared space, and we would expect vehicles to see that this is for people walking and cycling across the entire stretch of it. You know, the need for bollards there is probably, you'd be questioning why you would need bollards in a space like that, but I imagine it's the black colour of the road that does that and makes it seem like a road. Without doing something around there, I think we'll have conflict where cyclists and pedestrians will try and stay on the red areas of the street in order to try and avoid the potential conflict for cars. In fact, it's their street to use in their entirety, and the cars in many ways are the ones that should be taking more care in that area. So I think that's something that could be added. And it is a shame that the tree there has no extra companions to help it along that facade. So a bit more greenery, a bit more. Obviously, we're keeping the disabled parking, but I would like to see a bit more along there. But it is, yeah, those black and dark sets along there are the thing that are causing an issue with that road now. You've done a lot to improve it from where it was, but I think there is more that could be done to just really bring that together as a fantastic space.
Thank you for those comments, Peter. Colin, please.
Yes, Chair. If we start on the building itself, I think it looks quite a nice design. I think it works. It will improve Briga. I know we jokingly said that in the 1950s, when the way the Woolworths store was erected, that was probably cutting edge design, and we'd be sitting around the table saying we don't like that horrible Victorian stuff next to it. But certainly times move on, and this seems to me a sympathetic development down there, which I appreciate. It's taller than the existing, and it's taller than the one next door, but I think we have to be realistic that there needs to be certain mass within the development. And I think the developer has accepted that and created some upper floors, which, though they won't be invisible, will not be so much in your face, I think is the word. The rest of it, I think it looks quite interesting. We often get designs which are fairly, in my opinion, fairly bland, but there's plenty of detailing on here which reflects a lot of the detailing on those Victorian buildings up Briga. And onto Central Road. I keep trying to call it Commercial Street. I don't know why. Central Road. I think the ground floor works here because there's going to be plenty of light. There's going to be plenty of activity on that particular section, which currently is fairly dead, quite frankly. And I think once you get usages in the place, it helps other property owners to reevaluate what effectively their frontage is. So, where should we be aiming at? And so the other properties down there, further down Central Road, might actually start to look out onto Central Road in a way that they don't at the moment. I would say, I won't say it's a red line, but I think we have to make it very clear that we want to see something much more comprehensive on this section of Central Road than we're seeing at the moment. Sharon's point about the tree is valid, and I think because of the constraints on the tree itself, it's lifting itself out of the road. So there's going to have to be some serious work around it anyway to create space for the tree. And it struck us as we walked down towards the market after going on the site visit, crossing over the crossing. On the opposite side of the road, there's been a little, what do I say, pocket piece of greenery with some trees and some beds. And I think if you're looking for a exemplar of what you could do around that tree and on here, all you need to do is to just walk from here down to the market and look at that, because I think that really works. Small scale, intimate, but it makes that area into a pedestrian area and not into an area next to where the buses go. Okay, Chair.
Thank you, Colin. Very useful comments. A lot of agreement around the table on that. Can I bring in Councillor Walsh or Neil, please?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I think it's another application that's really benefited by the tender embrace of the City Plans Panel, Chair. It's really much improved. I think there's an awful lot to recommend. I won't go to dwell too much on what colleagues have already said, but I've got a lot of agreement with their comments so far, particularly regarding Central Road and the additional details we'll want to see there in due course. But I think looking at it from Briga, I think there's a lot to commend in the design. I think the architect can take a lot of credit for. I think it's really good. The detail is good. The stepping back is good. The meteorology is good. I think it replaces a very bad building that I think Councillor Campbell's right. I think sometime whenever it was built, they were going, we need to get rid of this Victorian rubbish. So let's put up this simple concrete modernism. But I think this is a far better replacement. I think other colleagues have covered the issues regarding more greenery and whatnot. From my own point of view, Chair, I think the approach to climate, energy and BREEAM is good. That's what we want to see. Again, very welcome to see that. So I don't have any negative concerns, Chair. So, I mean, at an appropriate time, I'd be prepared to move the recommendations.
Thank you, Councillor Walshaw. Asghar, please.
Thank you, Chair. And, you know, from the site visit this morning and have a looking at the building that is existing there, many people will not be saddened to miss that building. And this new proposal, I think it's a remarkable building. It's going to be, and it's going to improve the area as well. So I echo, you know, I welcome this new design and, you know, well detailed, and it blends in really nicely with the listed building side of it as well. Just on the back of the central road, what I said early on, I think it will be nice if we can have some improvements on the central road and have some landscaping around the tree so people can enjoy themselves while they are walking or having a small breaks. So that will be welcomed. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Khan. I see no more hands. Sharon, please.
I just wanted to say, I said it this morning to the officers and colleagues, saying that I go to the House of Fraser and I've never noticed how ugly the building were, because obviously we just go in that side. But looking at it, at what you propose that's going to be built, when you come out of Trinity, it'll be a really good site to look at. It's going to be brilliant. So I imagine myself, because when we finished, I went back and stood at Trinity by the Lady of the Cloth, is it called? Yes. And I'm thinking how ugly that building is. This will be a really good site to look at and draw people out, because that was the whole idea when Trinity was approved, to bring people out onto Brigette. And I think this will do it. And also with the landscaping and saving the tree and ensuring that it don't die. The people live in the buildings opposite, it'll be somewhere for them as well to sit and relax. So, you know, they've never had anything, because the tree every so often, I think it's the council pave it or brick it. So that'll be nice for them, because I know someone who lives around there and they've got nowhere to go really to enjoy apart from the cafe section. So I think they'll enjoy that as well once it's all come. So yes, once that area is developed, I think it will be well used, and I like it.
I think we all do, Sharon. Well done. So indeed, high praise for developers, in particular to Ed, the architect. Really well done. Thank you. I think it's generally well received. I know there was concern about the massing, but not particularly about the design. So can I ask Daljit, please, to sum up what we're going to be voting on fairly shortly?
Okay, thank you, Chair. I think you've done part of the summary for me. I think members on the whole are very supportive of the scheme. There have been a number of members who've raised questions about the extent and nature of the treatment to Central Road, but as both the applicant and officers have advised, that's an ongoing discussion. However, we will take into account what members have said, and we note those comments. The recommendation is to defer and delegate the decision, and that's subject to not only the completion of the Section 106 agreement, but it's also subject to resolving the outstanding concerns of the HSE. We can also address, because it's already covered in the report by condition, the detailed nature of the Section 278 works. Thank you, Chair.
Indulge it. Over to you, Councillor Walsall.
Move the recommendations, Chair.
Yeah, Chair, I'll second this, please.
All those in favour of the recommendation, please show. That's unanimous. Thank you. And can I thank the applicants and the architect once more? Good design. We like to see that type of quality come to Leeds. With the resolution of the pedestrian area, I think we're on the right track. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Have a good afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Chair, is it possible we could have just like 5-minute break? Yeah.
We're about to resume and we will be zoomed in soon.
We're live, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you, Debbie. Can we move on to the final item, agenda item 8? And it's a pre-application. Sarah, do you wish to say anything at this stage? Okay. Over to the applicants then. As you know, you're making a presentation to us. You have 10 minutes, but we might stress that a little bit if what you're saying is worth listening to. So it's entirely up to you. Make it interesting. Okay, when you're ready to begin.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, Chair, members. A little introduction. My name's Chris Johnson, Architectural Assistant at Enjoy Design Architects in Leeds. I'm here today with Greg Mitchell, Director at Enjoy Design. We are here on behalf of Town Centre Securities to present to you the scheme at 100 Merrion Centre and Wade House. The scheme, as you've visited this morning, is located in the north of the city centre, in the arena quarter of the city. On this plan, the sites in particular are labelled number 1 for 100 Merrion Centre, which we shorten to 100 MC, and number 2, which is Wade House. The aim of our presentation today is to introduce the emerging principles of scale and use on the site, and that we believe that the site is a sustainable and appropriate location for student accommodation regeneration of this phase of the Merrion estate. Now, 100 Merrion Centre and the Wade House proposals form the latest phase in a long-term redevelopment of the Merrion estate. In this image, we're showing the 4 major projects that have been delivered in the past 13 years, which have enabled sustainable regeneration strategy that has avoided estate-wide demolition. Many similar retail developments of this age have experienced this wholesale demolition. To introduce the site in more detail, Wade House is currently an 11-storey office building with ground and first floor retail. The offices are vacant as of 2021. And 100 Merrion Centre is ground floor retail with a disused cinema above. Town Centre Securities have undertaken several design studies regarding the reuse of the cinema, but none have proven commercially viable. It is worth noting that on the site there is a consent for a 17-storey office tower. This was approved in 2019 and includes the proposed regeneration of the courtyard and car park, which I believe you visited today. So a unique feature of the Merrion estate is the formation of the estate as a urban block in the city. This has established what we define as a visual Merrion podium, which is suitable for hosting tall buildings set further back from the public highway. What we believe is that Wade House has already begun to establish this principle by successfully sitting atop the podium in the centre of the estate since the 1960s. It's also worth noting that since the 2019 approval, appears there's a slide missing. Apologies. It is worth noting that since the 2019 approval, the arena quarter has substantially evolved to form a tall building cluster in line with the SPD along Merrion Way and Wade Lane. There's been movement away from an office and retail-led development towards a purpose-built student accommodation area, which has formed a reappraisal of the 100 Merrion Centre and Wade House sites. So what we're seeing here is our kind of conceptual approach to the design. Our first design principle has been to retain and reuse as much as possible. At Wade House, we've proposed a major retrofit and modernisation package with additional floors added to the top of it. At 100 Merrion Centre, the current construction means it's not suitable for a reuse and retrofit. So we've proposed careful demolition works to enable a suitable footprint for a taller building to be created on the site. This does form a tightly constrained but well-serviced site at 100 Merrion Centre. Following discussion with officers, we've established that a scale for both of the schemes can be identified. It's proposed that we add up to 3 stories on Wade House in line with technical constraints of the existing structure. At Wade House, we propose to remove the outdated facade, retrofit this with a high-performance modern envelope to meet modern standards. At 100 Merrion Centre, The new building is proposed to rise to a maximum of 35 stories. This is roughly in line with the what we identify as the higher building tier that is going to establish in the area. We then propose to split the initial 100 Merrion Centre mass into 3 components with an ambition to create a visual tall building cluster, which complements the contemporary tall building cluster emerging along Merrion Way, as shown in these diagrams. We also believe that this can establish characteristics that can be articulated to create visual interest in the building. This includes creating a front portion step of 1 story down to 34 stories. It enables the potential for a material and design detail to each of the components on 100 Merrion Centre, which alongside Wade House would establish an emerging design code for a pair of contemporary buildings here. As part of our studies of the scale, we assessed the proposals in its context by preparing a series of key long distance views from the adopted Leeds tall building SPD. This shows that the scheme would visually blend into the taller building context around the city centre from a long distance. In discussion with officers, we've then also established several closer views, and we've modelled these in the View City software. These enable us to establish the principle of the Merrion Podium that can help to host these taller buildings alongside currently constructed and proposed built context of the area. Now, looking specifically at the layout, within the Merrion estate, the proposal has been designed to retain a strong retail frontage to the public-facing shopping mall. A new route is introduced to enable access to the new landscape courtyard, alongside secure access routes specifically for the student accommodation to encourage interaction with the estate. The ambition is to maximise these connections, create a truly sustainable site, and unlocks previously inaccessible areas of the Merrion estate. As part of our assessment, the proposal will look to add new pedestrian and cycle routes for students and the public to connect the site into its surroundings. These enable good access to the Merrion Centre and city centre amenities of the area, supporting a walkable, localised economy and no detriment to the existing Merrion estate delivery strategy. Both 100 Merrion Centre and Wade House will be well suited to handle the peak vehicle traffic that can occur at student drop-off times. This would be managed through an estate-led strategy, utilising the Merrion multi-storey car park. A route can be established between both proposals along the existing Merrion estate balcony, and this enables direct access for both of the accommodations. It is proposed that there would also be a restricted vehicle delivery and drop-off route, which could also be operated from the courtyard. This would form a well-lit and controlled access to ensure a safe, secure route for out-of-hours access from Wade Lane. On the upper accommodation levels, we've assessed that the scheme can be compliant with the draft purpose-built student accommodation and HMO SPD requirements for both proposals. These layouts are forming part of an emerging student accommodation strategy to demonstrate that the footprint is feasible, but these are subject to change in the future as the design is developed. At this stage, we've also considered that the proposals would be suitable for future conversion into private residential or hotel conversion without major demolition. These ensure that the buildings have a long-term life cycle that can respond to future changes and needs as is seen fit. What we have also begun to establish is that there's an emerging design approach towards a contemporary unitised system, which gives a lightweight crystalline appearance through varying transparent and opaque panels. There is an aspiration for a shared language between 100 Merrion Centre and Wade House through material and detail design. There's also consideration that for Wade House, we could host respectful modernist details that reflect its 20th century heritage. Our landscape proposals, which have been prepared by Reform, illustrate an emerging public realm that would regenerate the courtyard site into a new attractive public amenity. Opportunities for further outdoor student or retail amenity in the form of roof terraces could also occur, improving the surveillance and activity of this area. Crucially in sustainability as well, our proposal responds to the Leeds City Council's climate emergency declaration by embedding sustainability principles from an early stage. Fundamentally, this includes our retain and reuse strategy, by the reuse of Wade House and the insurance that the buildings could be adapted for future use. The site location also is a key part of this strategy. It encourages a sustainable lifestyle through its proximity to amenities, to encourage the realisation of a walking and cycling city. Specific technical details and specifications can be clarified as the design process continues. In summary, today we've presented our initial ideas and ambitions for the 100 Merrion Centre and Wade House proposals. In the current direction of travel, these conceptual visualisations of the scheme illustrate how a regeneration of the site could become a truly sustainable development in the Merrion estate. Thank you very much for your time, and we welcome any comments or questions.
Thank you, Chris, and I'm sure there will be questions from members.
Who's going to be first?
Peter and Colin.
I'll do a question not necessarily related to the buildings, but the purpose. Obviously, the ideal requirement for the purpose-built student accommodation is to try and relieve some of the houses of multiple occupancy and some of the other areas we've got the city, free up that family housing. One of the difficulties I always find when we're looking at this is that we're not necessarily looking at having the full range of purpose-built accommodation that we may need. So when I was a student in the city 15 years or so ago, I found that the houses, shared house was 2/3 of the price maybe of purpose-built accommodation that was around at that time. But what we tend to be looking at, I think, is very high-end, very expensive purpose-built student accommodation, which obviously is going to serve a purpose to get some of the students out of some of those houses, but maybe not those that are impacted most by cost. I just wondered if you could talk around the level of what we're looking at here in terms of the purpose-built accommodation, what kind of, whether it's a high-end accommodation you're looking for, whether it's more inclusive and going to be suiting all the different students of the city, and how it's going to be different then maybe from some of the other offers that are around.
I could sort of try to answer your question, and it's not an easy one to answer at the moment because what we're trying to do at the moment is establish the principle, I guess, of student accommodation. This isn't a scheme that our applicant would be building themselves. They'll be working hand in hand with a student accommodation provider. So I think it's a very interesting point you make, and it's certainly one that we could take away with us. I think almost we'd need to sort of take your question and answer it a little bit further down the line. Not that we want to dodge it at this point, but we probably can't really answer it if truth be told. We can't really give it the sort of the thought that it deserves.
Come back to Sydney coming in. Thanks, and I appreciate that. And I think the principle is very sound in my view, and it fits in with what's emerging. If you can just be cognizant of that then as we're going through, because actually to really make a popular and diverse student area out of this, we do need the full mix of students, not just those that tend to be the wealthier. So
I think the presentation we're making today is exactly, these are the kind of comments we would kind of welcome, because now's the time to take them on board, take them away and make them part of the design process. So, so thank you for that. We will take it on board.
Thank you. Colin, please.
I suppose you've partly answered my question, but which was going to be, have you got a student provider on board with you now? And I suppose the obvious question is, bearing in mind that we did give permission for an office block not too long ago, what's made you change your mind?
So to answer your first question, advanced talks are ongoing with a student accommodation provider. No firm commitment is made with them at the moment, which kind of overlaps with the first question really as to why we can't answer that in too much detail. But we're certainly not here, should we say, flying a kite. There are potential end users in the background with discussions ongoing. You're right, a consent was granted for office accommodation. Of course, the market is an ever-changing beast, and unfortunately the office accommodation or the potential end user that we were here to try and secure a consent for at the time, the deal sadly fell away and didn't move forward. That is exactly why we're here looking at an alternative use.
Neil, please.
Thanks, Chair. I mean, to be honest, mine are more a set of comments really than questions, direct questions, and it's better for the applicant. It was a good presentation. I liked it very much. Probably better to hear them rather than me to ask them direct questions. I'll come in at an appropriate time, Chair.
First one. Kaylee, please, Councillor Brooks.
Thanks, Chair. I agree with my colleague, Councillor Carlisle. So I represent this part of the city and a little slice of like Hyde Park, Burley, and a little slice of Woodhouse. Like my ward's quite big. I for all the PBSA that's going up in the city, I have not seen any reduction in demand on HMOs in the sort of traditional student areas. So, and I agree that I think the majority of the reason for that will be because of the price of it. So I'd just like to back up my colleague on his comments really, and just ask if you've seen any evidence to the contrary of what I've noticed on the ground.
I too was a student in Leeds many years ago, and I still wonder where the heck we all used to live, because the amount of student accommodation that has been built. I can't honestly answer your question, but there still seems to be an insatiable appetite for student accommodation one way or another. I think just to make the point that going forward, there will be a detailed report on demand coming forward with an application. You know, that will be part of the next stage.
You, Councillor Khan, please.
Thank you, Chair. My question is regarding the Wade House. You know, the external improvements. Do you have any plans that you're going to improve the external
appearance?
Yes.
The images that we've put forward today are conceptual, and the reason they're conceptual is that the plans and the elevations quite clearly work hand in glove. And as we continue talks with potential end users, the mix will influence the elevations, as you can imagine. I think for a whole host of reasons, both technical and appearance, we would be looking for a more unitized glazed system. So the images you're seeing, they're not accidentally fairly glassy in appearance. I think that's kind of the flavor we'd be looking to adopt, but it's probably about as far as we can take them at the moment, whilst the plans are somewhat generic in form.
Are there any further questions? Sharon, please.
Can I just ask, with regards to inside the Merion Centre we talked about around the back, where the cash point is that going to be change or anything different going to happen there?
So on the plan, essentially that is around the point where we'd be creating a new thoroughfare. So becoming essentially in that cash point area. It's the one adjacent to the Home Bargains retail unit. Yeah. So essentially that would be in the position where we would look to create the new thoroughfare through. Obviously, there'd be a kind of relocation and a retail strategy that would determine where that could be adjusted to. To the courtyard. So it might be useful to be able to just see the layout, because essentially what we do propose is that there is the strong retail frontage maintained within the Merion Mall itself, but then we essentially create a new means of accessing this kind of unlocked courtyard space behind. And to facilitate that, there will be some minor demolition to be able to create that thoroughfare through. But I think the ambition would be they would be removed.
The thoroughfare to the courtyard will be where the cash points is at this moment in time.
I believe so, in that area.
Oh, in that area.
Unfortunately, I can't place them exactly in my mind, unfortunately, but they'll be in that area.
Will that be for members of the public also, or just those who live there?
Yes, it will be. There'll be obviously this will work in line with the Merion Estates wider strategy to be able to do that. But the kind of ambition is to be able to make that public space and a public thoroughfare.
Yeah, the only reason why I asked that because I remember when the office building was approved, I think, about making it accessible.
Yeah.
Okay.
Similar, there'll be a similar ambition to be able to make it accessible.
And on that point, which is a very good one, will it be car free? At the moment it's not car free, and there's a security guy with a barrier who lifts in, lets cars in. Surely we'll be getting away from that.
I think it's
very sustainable. Doesn't need cars.
A simple answer to that, yes, is the answer. We're looking at a car-free courtyard. Yeah, very much so.
Moving on to comments, Steve.
Thank you, Chair. Much appreciated. So I think, it was an interesting presentation. I liked a lot of it very much. I think that sort of scale of massing and design, the height, I think it's an appropriate location for that. I think that's where we like to see that. I think the way the Merrion block, as the Merrion estate has evolved over the last couple of years, has been very welcome as it moves from that hint of dystopian 70s architecture into something that looks fit for a major European city in the early 21st century. And the sad thing about the Merrion Centre is that I once was shown a load of photos from 1972 when it had just been built, and it looked dystopian even then. So we're glad to see it. We're glad to see it evolve. So this is welcome. But I think there are some things that are going to need addressing. I think first of all, we're in with approach to climate and to energy. We're in the process, so you'll be aware of a climate emergency and local plan review, which gathers weight with every passing day. We're sort of 2/3 through that process. So we very much want to see attention paid to that and see that this can be an exemplar development with that regard. Certainly the things that you've mentioned so far give some indication of that. That's very welcome, Chair. Very much want to see a focus on that. As Councillors Carlisle and Brooks have mentioned, that the student mix is going to be really important to us. The affordability of all this is going to be really important. There is a lot of PSPO in that area that could be considered to be all fishing in the same pond. And at some point, that's going to break as a model.
Yes.
And I'd hate to see something good come forward in this location and for that to be the case. I represent Headingley in Hyde Park, which is neighbouring ward to Councillor Brooks, and the holy grail for a lot of our constituents is for PSPO to finally capture second, third, final year, whatever students. So I really think you providers should be looking towards that, because the growth of PSPO, I didn't know there was enough. What am I? Oh, PSPO. Oh, good grief. There are so many acronyms in local government. Let's go with purpose-built student accommodation. Thank you, Councillor Brooks. I'm sure you're all nodding. So, but there is a lot of purpose-built in the area.
Yeah.
And the points remain. Wrong abbreviation or no. And for a lot of our constituents, the holy grail is that capturing those later year students, because that will directly free up family accommodation. I'm sure the lure of the student house, Chair, will always be there. But if purpose-built could crack that market, that would be incredibly welcome in the wards that a lot of us represent. So I think that's going to be interesting to see how you approach that. But I think more widely that this area is going to take some real management. There's the hotel right next to it.
Sure.
There are multiple eateries, both eat-in and fast food. There's an awful lot of PSPO in the area, Chair. I think we need to see details of how both your application deals with the management of all of that, but actually we need to look more broadly, Chair, and we need to get a view, I think, as a panel as to what the agglomeration of all this is going to mean. Picture the scene on the second week of September. You can imagine how it might look. So we've not had not too many problems so far, but at some point, that may well happen. But I would give this a sort of, a cautiously optimistic sort of, thumbs up, really. I think there's a lot of good here. And I think the concepts and the scale is correct. It's just getting those details right. But it is, just to finish up, Chair, it is back to the offer and the student mix and how that's going to perhaps be different.
Sure.
I think ultimately, I think because if your operator could crack that is a huge market to crack. Huge market to crack. Thanks, Chair.
Neil, Colin, please.
I suppose touching on the freeing up the houses of Headingley, which we've been talking about for as long as I can remember, and Hyde Park and Burley, and and several other areas I could mention. Right. I don't think it's the function of panel. I don't think we can book the market. You know, if there's a demand for purpose-built student accommodation, then people will come along and try and fill that demand. You know, we can live in hope that one day you'll be able to walk through Headingley and you won't be tripping over students all the time. But I don't see that happening in the near future. And I'm also sympathetic to the developer, because the old Merion Centre, as somebody who remembers it opening, and thinking at the time it was, well, if I'm honest with you, people actually came to look at it because it was such a novelty. And it's looking a bit tired in places, and the developer has over the years upgraded sections almost in a, I was going to say circular, they've gone around the site in effect. But I suppose my comments really relate to the questions we're being asked. And I think that's it. So do members consider the proposed site is suitable for students? Well, that's an interesting question, because certainly all around there, we've got substantial numbers of purpose-built student accommodation. And so to say in principle, you couldn't put another block up there, I think is difficult to resist the idea of. But when you talk about what about the living conditions, and I suppose the difference between the other student blocks in the area is, I suppose, the front door. So they're walking off the street. This proposal really is a block in the middle of a development. And to get to it, you effectively walk up an alley out of Wade Lane into a pretty unpleasant area at the moment. And it seems to me that if you put in what they're talking about, which is 1,000 students into that space, it's really not a very pleasant environment for them, or a safe environment actually, for them to use. And I'm not convinced that this talk of a landscape courtyard, it's not a landscape courtyard. We were there this morning. It's a small back of development site, which we're going to put a few trees, or put a tree in, and a few planters. I go back to the point I've made on several occasions, which is, on a pleasant evening like today, where would you go to sit out? And you wouldn't go and sit there because it's surrounded by tall buildings, so it's dark and unpleasant. I don't think it's really that. I'm not convinced this is a suitable site for that type of development, because I think the living conditions for the students, the rooms themselves, I don't have but I think what we've normally expected, and which we saw on the previous application, the previous item, was we were talking about a student facility with a downstairs accommodation which provided services for students but had a high profile. You're not going to get that here. This is a back alley development. I know you're looking at your watch, Chair, but I'll keep going. And I think that I think the other thing relates to the design scale and massing. The design, I'm not really sure about. We've got some artist impressions. That would be work in progress, I would suppose. But I am mindful, we went to look at the site from Millennium Square on the site visit this morning, which I think was extremely valuable for me, because it did indicate that effectively this will be highly visible from Millennium Square, and it will back up against the museum. And I'm not convinced with what we've been shown today that those buildings will in effect frame the museum. And I used as my example this morning the old BBC building. if you go and look at the BBC building, that is framed by a modern building. And in my opinion, that's a classic of how to do it right. It really works, in my opinion. This, I'm not sure about. It's a big building and a big extension. I've no clear indication how that will complement the museum building. And not, in fact, because it will be a very large tower quite close to the museum, how it will not dominate it. So at the moment, I need a lot more convincing on this one, Chair.
Thank you, Colin. I have to say, when we were in Millennium Square this morning, that was a general concern of the members present. Certainly, the height of it needs very careful looking at, and how you lighten the top of it at the very least. So it does need a lot of work there, Sarah, I think. Kaylee, please.
Thanks, Chair. I think in terms of like the design and everything, because we're only at pre-app stage, there's a lot of flexibility there. I think the design could address some of the concerns about amenity on site. I mean, would it be possible, for example, to design in some roof terraces, or sort of stepped in terraces, to make a bit more of an interesting design? Just throwing some stuff out there. I suppose also a concern that is often raised by local residents is about impact on amenities. I'm not talking so much about parks and green spaces. I'm more talking about GPs. And I know that the student medical practice is oversubscribed. So I would be interested to know like what kind of provision would be in place at the time of building for the residents of this block as well, because it is a lot of people, isn't it? So yeah, yeah, I mean, I don't think it's the wrong place at all. I think that a lot of the issues that have been raised can be designed out, a bit of clever design, and a bit of thought, a bit of extra thought. I'm not saying that you've not thought, and just, yeah, making sure that you're putting yourself into the shoes of the person who's going to be living there. Yeah. Cheers.
Thank you, Kaylee. Any more comments? Peter.
I'll just do a quick one because we've got a question around the emerging design scale and massing. Obviously, the design, there's a lot of work to go through till we see what it looks like. So that's hard for us to see now. And I think we'll have a lot of questions at that next stage. So it's probably, it may be something that's useful for you to bring back to us again before it comes to something final, maybe, so that we can see a bit more. But the one thing I do like is around the concept of it looking like a cluster of buildings rather than a single one, because I think that will help very bit. A lot of the buildings in the city, while we have a number of tall buildings already and some that are coming through, some of them do look in isolation at the moment. And I think what you've done is come up with a concept that could be, you could build more on that perhaps, and that might feed into the comments around Councillor Brooks's view around whether roof terraces or anything there, but looking like a cluster of buildings rather than one single one standing there in the middle, I think it is a good concept that I'd like to see carry on through the next designs.
Thank you, Peter. Any, Sharon?
My comments is the same as yours over there regarding the back and the entrance. If we're going, some people are going to live there, and it can't be just no cars won't be there and just a little square for them. It's got to be welcoming, and it's got to be somewhere that you would want to live. So I always put myself in that position. Would I want to go and live there? So a lot of work needs to be done on that. you know, because if it's students are going, we know that they come, they're only here for a while and they go away, but others, but you know, it needs to be something that's bright, vibrant, not too dark, not look like just a dark alley, because then we're gonna end up getting people getting assaulted, etc. So if it could open up somehow as well and be bright. Yeah, so that definitely, I wouldn't want to be walking around there thinking I'm going home in a dark alley. So it needs a lot of work on that.
Thank you, Sharon. You've heard members' comments. I'm sure that'll be a guide to you. Can we move on to section 9 then? There's some questions that officers have posed for you. Starting with 9.2, do members consider that the proposed use of the site for students' accommodation to the upper floors and use of Class E commercial use to one unit at ground floor with the resulting loss of potential retail space is acceptable in principle? It's almost 2 questions there, really, isn't it? Okay. What are members' comments on that?
It should have been split up, all this question. You know, do members consider the proposed use of the site for students' accommodation, the upper floor? That should have been a question on its own without all the other clustered in, but we don't have.
As far as I'm aware, we've got an excess of retail units in the city centre, so I don't think that losing a retail unit is that bad a thing.
I think we can all agree with that part of it, Kelly. You're right. I mean, when we went through the Merrion Centre, we did see a lot of steel shutters and what have you, and the same in Brigade, which is concerning. So perhaps that part is fine. What about the use of the building for students? How do we feel about that? We're okay with that. Colin, you're not. Okay.
Like I said at the very beginning of my comments, there are a number of student properties in the area. I think I need more convincing that simply tweaking this one to make it usable by students. I need more convincing, but I appreciate what you're saying.
Useful comments, Colin. It's been captured, but I think the majority believe that it's acceptable for students. Is that right? Am I reading that one right? I take silence as agreement.
Is that part A of question 9.2 or 9.3? Because 9.3, I quite definitely do not believe the living conditions are suitable, because I don't think, you know, that entrance of Wade Lane, that shared servicing road, that quite well gestured at a landscape courtyard is where I think, as I say, this is for 1,000 people. You know.
We're not on 9.3, but I think a lot of people might actually agree with that. It's got to be right, hasn't it? So I think 9.2 was general agreement with Colin not in agreement. Going on to 9.3, subject to confirmation of detailed proposal, do members consider that the living conditions within the student accommodation would be acceptable? I mean, we don't know a great deal about that, do we, apart from the size of the rooms? Kaylee?
I mean, it's a pre-app, so we don't have all of that detail, so we can't really comment on it. And it does say subject to, so like we'll make a decision on that when it comes forward as a full application.
It's a very wise and fair point. So we would need more information on that. Okay. And last, do members support the emerging?
Sorry, Chair. Can I just say, when you say more information, it might also be helpful to ask what the more information is. And it struck me on site today that if you look at the Wade Lane entrance with the barrier and the one at the other end, effectively that's the service yard. That's currently, this is the service yard for the entirety of the development. So I think we need to understand how you will possibly service the rest of the development if, in effect, you've taken out a substantial chunk of that service area. Because at the moment, I think from my point of view anyway, if the level of servicing vehicles continues to be at the same level as it is at the moment, then that will create a conflict between the residents and that service vehicle. I would, for example, say quite categorically, you'd want to close the entrance from Wade Lane that we walked up this morning to vehicles, full stop. Part of making it a better pedestrian environment is to get the vehicles out of the way, turn it into actually something that looks like a path to get into home, doesn't it? Sorry.
Honestly, don't think there's any disagreement on that with you, Colin. And it did come up in questions that would there be cars allowed? And, you know, I mentioned the little barrier with the security van on. And as far as I'm concerned, that's all going to go. Is that correct? Yeah, okay. And clearly it's something we will be watching very, very closely on the outline.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. That just got me thinking, actually, Colin. You know, at the moment, is there like a tunnel or basement where services are being used at the moment for storage or for stores?
Yes, there is. Yeah, so you might have noticed it on your visit today. There is an existing service tunnel, and the proposal would retain that service tunnel. I believe at the moment the estate is primarily serviced from that tunnel, and actually that car park section is not used very much for servicing of the retail units. So the service tunnel would be maintained as part of the proposal.
Well, I have to say to you, Chair, that there were several vans there today.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I just wanted to say, I think that's the information we will be requesting at application stage, is servicing for the entirety of the centre rather than just for the two buildings that we're talking about. Because I think from previous site visits on this site, the majority in the big scheme, the big sites are serviced from the tunnel, but some of the units on this side are serviced from the top. And I think we just need clarity on that to see whether those units that remain can be serviced from below or whether there is some residual requirement for servicing. But I think it would be a really good thing if we can close that exit onto Wade Lane, clearly retain the access, and then if there is any high level service requirements remaining, see what turning facility we can get in there and send them out under the tunnel. I think that's the way we would have to go with it.
Gillian, that's very useful. Can we go on to 9.4 then? New members supporting merging design, scale and massing. And of course, we've already commented on that regarding where it frames the museum. Yeah. But apart from that, are we okay? We would want to see a much better design. Colin, I know you were very vocal on this and you were very concerned.
I think at the moment, it appears to be too big and in your face, quite frankly. And I'll say no more than that because at the moment we're at very vague detailing, aren't we?
Well, that's a work in progress. Sorry.
I agree as well, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you, Kaylee. So with that, I think you've given a good steer to the applicants, and we look forward to the scheme coming back with the improvements that we need and more clarity regarding parking. Okay, can we?
Thanks very much.
Yep. Well, parking and services. There's student bikes as well. Don't forget, there's 1,000 students on there. There'll be several hundred on there. Yep. Okay. Can I thank you both for presenting this afternoon? Have a safe journey home. And for us, work never quite finishes, does it? Just to remind you that the next meeting is on the 14th of July. I don't know what's going to be on the agenda then. Even I haven't seen it, but I'm sure there'll be plenty. But thank you for your attendance. And we finish before 4 o'clock. That's always a bonus, isn't it? Thank you. Thank you.
Can I just say, Debbie, that